Okay, so we're just going to give you a chance to share your picture and just a word or two, a phrase, a hashtag, a caption, if that was your Instagram post. What you love about your vision for recovery so far, where we are. We're kind of in the middle. We're going to get today into details and plans. But from where we are right now, who wants to share first? Everyone gets to share. Don't all speak at once. Kim.
I'll start. Ben challenged me to do a blind pick. So I just reached out and grabbed this one, and it's perfect. So what I have here is a picture of blue skies. There are a decent amount of clouds, clearly an electric line, probably installed by a lineman, and a ton of wires crossing the picture and the clouds. To me, that represents communication, connection, and clarity.
Communication, connection, and clarity. Love it. Thank you. Someone else? Antoinette.
So my picture is like an ornate antique kind of like keyhole. So I was drawn to it I love the color. What I was thinking of, to me, it represents the rooted portion of our recovery vision. It's still beautiful, but after the storm, everything around it looks kind of tattered, but still beautiful. And even though I can't see through the hole, I don't know what the future holds, but for some reason, I'm really hopeful about what's on the other side.
I love that, so hopeful. All right. Were you using the fire or no?
No.
Worked with the keyhole. Okay, just that one. All right, who else?
I'll jump in. Okay, I have 3 pictures, but I'm leaning on one because a song came to mind.
Are we
And
singing?
it's a bridge. I'm not going to sing. I believe we know this song, though. So it's a bridge, and I thought about Paul Simon's song, Bridge Over Troubled Waters, and I Googled it. And it said, the line like a bridge over troubled water is a metaphor of someone living through a trying time in their life. And I will lay me down references to sacrifice, perseverance they find through difficulty. So I believe that with vision, we can make it over in hope and successfully.
Oh my gosh. Woo. Beautiful. Beautiful. Bridge over troubled water. We will persevere. Sage, you were going to go? Come on, Sage.
I said I didn't want to go after that. I'll try. I was simpler. So I have echinacea. There's actually a nice bumblebee on there, and as you know, I'm a beekeeper. But so echinacea is a natural herb for building immunity, especially during hard times, cold winters, exposure to the elements. So also because it's spring and a new flower, a new growth. So I was thinking building our resistance, our resilience, our immunity, and having new growth.
Nice. With a little pollinator there to help us
Yes.
out, right? Flitting from flower to flower, connecting, tying in with Kim's. Beautiful.
I'll jump
Maggie.
in. I have a picture of the Grand Canyon with the Colorado River in the center. And despite how much pain I feel like we've all gone through and are still experiencing, the amount of resources our community is about to receive is kind of mind-blowing. And the potential for what we can do to not only rebuild, but like really build the visions we've talked about and planned for decades and never had the money to, like, it's here. But it only happens with getting big picture, getting really clear on where you're going, because the second you go into this canyon, you're gonna get lost and lose sight. The other thing I really liked about this picture is that the river is at the center of it. The river is at the center of our community, and it just caused a lot of harm because of things humans have done to the weather systems. But it's really special, and the river is gonna keep it's gonna hold its ground no matter what. So we need to keep it at the center and give it the space it needs to be part of our community as we have this mega vision for possibly one of the most spectacular outlooks for our community ever.
Fabulous. Thank you. Okay. Who else? Who's next?
I guess since we're doing his
Okay.
Bo went? No, I will not go before you.
She wants you to go first, Bo.
So I chose a beautiful sunrise over a landscape, and this spoke to my higher power, and I try to spread love and light in everything that I do. But also, it spoke to sometimes things can feel very dark, and there can feel like there is no light and there is no hope, but always remembering that that sun will rise in that morning. There will be that daybreak. And so this kind of felt like rooted in resilience and also ready for tomorrow for me.
Nice. Thank you. Deborah.
Okay, so I have two pictures. One is of someone surfing through waters, and the other are bright lights. And Shanika said that this one was Deborah, keep the lights on. Uh, But actually, I'm going to start with my surfer person, which is kind of a signal of us traversing through troubled water, and that we will persevere. And this one is actually about bright lights. I think there's a lot of hope, and that we have a brighter future ahead of us.
Beautiful. Thank you. Brad, you next? Share the mic.
You all have done really well at this. I feel like the bar's been set somewhat high. I picked a cactus.
You a little
I'm
prickly?
going to bring this home. I feel as if we're in somewhat of a prickly situation right now. That, for those who know, a cactus can be pretty dangerous unless you're in a situation where you absolutely need water in the desert. And if you plan carefully and are strategic about it, you can cut these cactuses and use them to gain that salvation that you need. And so this is, I think, is a pretty good symbol of it's difficult situation that we're in. But if we think about it, if we're careful and strategic, we can actually find the salvation throughout all of that.
Love it.
I mean, I visited once.
All right. Rachel.
Okay, I'll go, and I have a landscape here, and why I picked it is, at least for me, I know there's a moon up, but you could interpret this as being dawn or dusk, and we communicate a lot about recovery being a continuum, and as one phase is ending, a new phase is beginning, and it does feel like we're starting into more of that medium-term to long-term recovery planning, so just noting that as one phase ends, another phase is beginning.
The cycles that we go through.
I think I'm the last one, right?
I think so.
So, much like Kim, I took my own challenge and just randomly picked a card because I don't think a lot of times we get a choice in what's ahead of us. So to me, at first, this card was disorienting and I didn't know which way was up. Which again, feels kind of like the past few months. But what I found is if you slow down, take a second to focus, it becomes much clearer and you can see which way is up. So hopefully that's what we do today.
All right.
That way.
That way. Yeah, with that light reflecting on there. Very nice. Any thoughts on the kind of themes you heard overall between all of your pictures? On this day of spreading some love?
I heard themes of hope, resilience.
Hope and resilience. Any other themes?
Struggle.
Struggle.
Uncertainty.
I heard from Ben and Rachel, which we haven't heard from y'all a lot so far in the retreat, but I heard intention and diligence.
Nice. Good. Well, we've hung the pictures. We hang those? The pictures are all over there with the themes, so we can kind of keep those in front of us as we go through today, where we get into some of the harder work of moving forward, making choices, starting to build some plans, where you're going to go with your key priorities around people, housing, the economy, and the infrastructure and environment. So that's where we're going from here. Bo, are you doing anything else before we turn it over to our Next agenda item? Okay. Next up is a briefing from our Finance and Management Services folks.
I think Ms. Campbell's going to kick us off.
You taking this one?
All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. And speaking of hope, uncertainty, keeping lights on, perseverance, uncertainty, steadfastness, that is kind of the theme for our budget. We went through a little bit of a different budget process this year, obviously because of the, I use the term, uncertainty regarding the budget, and we wanted to start having conversations with council very, very early. Usually, when we come to the retreat, we kind of almost have the budget already baked and have kind of sort of our recommendations. Here are the next steps we think should take place. As you all know, this is not a traditional time for our community or a traditional budget process. So we want to provide you all with kind of some information about the budget process we are currently in and some, I wouldn't call them austerity, but I would call them some possibly budget reduction, budget management initiatives. Then we'll talk about the kind of the future budget, but we'll also talk about the process that you went through to even develop this year's budget. I'm going to turn it over to Tony McDowell and Lindsay Spangler just shortly, but what I will say is that we're not asking you for any decisions today. This is going to be an evolving process. We have a number of other meetings, additional work sessions, because this is, again, an unusual budget process. We don't have all the information that we need to make some key decisions, and we're going to talk about what key decisions need to be made over the next several months. But this is slow, steady. We think we've got some information that will be helpful, that will point in a direction, but I don't know that we should be making too many decisions based on the information that's presented to you today, because things are evolving, particularly when I say things are evolving, it is just getting particularly information about sales taxes and property taxes, which is our revenue stream for the most part. And just one other thing before I turn it over to Tony. I know that the community feels like, well, Deborah, you just got $225 million. But that $225 million is very focused on specific things that we can spend it on. It is not on operations for the most part. It's mostly capital and those kinds of things. And so we're going to talk a lot about our operating and personnel budget today, and not necessarily a whole, and our capital budget, and not a whole lot about the federal funding that we are receiving. And it's like, isn't this about the Helene recovery? Yes, it is. And then there is budget for Helene recovery, but there's also a need for us to focus on, again, our existing operating and capital budget. So I will now turn it over to Mr. McDowell. Thank you, Tony.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Tony McDowell, Finance Director. Good morning. Good to see everybody this morning. Lindsay Spangler, our new Budget and Performance Manager, I say new, she's been with us a little over 6 months now, is here today. She'll be helping me with the presentation. And also Jay Dundas, our Capital Management Director, will be here as well to talk about the capital piece. So I appreciate the introduction, Ms. Campbell. And this meeting today, the City Council retreat every year, really is kind of the kickoff of the budget process for us. And the budget process lasts essentially 5 months or so between now and June of each year. And like Deborah said, this is very much a different budget process than any that we've ever been through because of Helene. And so what we want to do today is kind of take y'all through the story of where we're headed with next year's budget. But really to understand that, we have to go back and kind of take a look at where we ended last budget year, look at how Helene has impacted our budget this year, and then start talking about some of the key decisions and kind of the path forward for budget development for next fiscal year. So I'm going to jump in. So we got key takeaways for today. And like I said, we're going to kind of tell you all the story today in kind of 3 chapters. And that first chapter is going to be the one I'm going to start with. And I'm going to go back and do a brief overview of last year's budget process. And if you all remember, it was a challenging budget process financially, primarily due to the fact that we were having revenue growth that was slowing down, and that was primarily our sales taxes. And at the same time as we were having slow revenue growth, we were still having continued inflationary pressures, particularly around personnel costs. And I'll show you all some numbers on that. And then obviously we started this budget year. We didn't get very far into it, barely through the first quarter, and Tropical Storm Helene hit. And it's had obviously major impacts on the local economy and the city's budget as well. And Lindsay will show you all some of the numbers related to that. And the key number, I think that third bullet there, to date, the city has spent or has under contract approximately $41.5 million that we've spent in our initial Helene response. We do expect most of that spending to be covered by 100% by FEMA. And so the budgetary impact there, even though we've spent a lot of money, like I said, we do expect most of that or all of that to be covered by FEMA. The area that's not covered by FEMA, and this is really the key budget impact for the current year we're in, is revenue loss. Like Ms. Campbell said, we rely heavily on property and sales taxes to fund our budget. We're looking at some revenue losses there, also some losses in our water system as well for this year. Currently, we're estimating revenue losses of about $17 to $18 million this year. And again, Lindsay will show you all some details of that. To help offset those revenue losses, we've implemented some strategies for the remainder of this fiscal year to slow spending. The budget team has been working collaboratively with departments over the last few weeks to develop that plan, and we'll show you all some of the details of that. And we have been able to achieve some pretty significant savings already to help offset some of the revenue loss, particularly in the general fund. And then we do have 2 key takeaway slides today. Ms. Campbell allowed us to do 2 today. And so on the second slide, second key takeaway slide, we really start to talk about next year's budget process. And again, a lot of uncertainty around kind of where we're at. We're in an unprecedented situation. We've gotten some additional data on property and sales taxes, but we still have a lot that we don't know about where we're headed next year with our revenues. Even with those challenges, we do have some opportunities, obviously, with the additional funding coming in, and in particular, we would point out the CDBG-DR money that we've received. And so with revenues challenged in our regular operating budget, we're going to be looking to those types of revenue sources and partnerships to help us address council's priorities in Helene recovery. Ms. Campbell mentioned the 5-year capital spending plan. Jay Dundas is going to kind of go through that with you all. We're in the process of updating the 5-year CIP, and we've got really kind of 3 buckets of spending that's going to be happening over the next 5 years on the capital side. One is obviously for recovery projects. We have the GEO bonds that passed back in November that infused about $80 million into our capital program. And then we have what we call our regular CIP that's ongoing as well. So a lot of activity going on the capital side. And then finally, the last thing to point out is, we're not looking for any final decisions today. This is really kind of the start of the budget journey this year. But we are going to share with you all, and we have this on an upcoming slide, some of the key decisions that staff and council will need to make to help inform our upcoming budget work sessions as we start to move into March and April and start to talk about the budget more. All right, so an outline of kind of where we're headed today. Again, I'm going to recap for you all the fiscal year 25 budget process. That's the fiscal year we're in right now. Lindsay's going to talk about how Helene has impacted the budget this year. We have some economic data that we're going to show you all, show you the city expenses and revenues that the impact of Helene on those over the last few months, the saving strategies that the budget team has put together with departments. And then I'm going to come back and talk about the outlook for next year. Jade's going to talk about capital planning, and then we'll finish off with next steps and some discussion. Went the wrong way. Oh, wait, sorry. key decisions. So we did want to, before we go any further, and we'll have this slide again at the end. Like Ms. Campbell said, we're not looking for any decisions today, but there are some key points that we need to start thinking about. And so we wanted to put these on a slide and kind of talk through these at the beginning, and then, like I said, we'll come back to them at the end. I've mentioned those saving strategies that the city manager's office and the organization has worked to develop to implement this year to help balance the budget. And so we'll want to talk to you all about those, and hopefully we previewed these with you all already. And so hopefully we will be able to get you all's approval to move forward as we have on those. We also would ask the question, are there other cost savings or actions that should be considered as we start to move forward into next year's budget as well? Another key question we'll be seeking guidance on is, should a salary increase for city employees be considered in next year's budget? As I mentioned, resources are going to be very constrained next year, and personnel costs are a big part of our budget. And so we're going to need to talk some, today and in the work sessions over the next few weeks and months about salary increases and what we might be able to afford for city employees for next year. We also are going to talk some about our fund balance and what are you all's policy objectives around fund balance. We have a fund balance policy of 15%, that we maintain a 15% fund balance, unassigned fund balance in our budget. We have been in conversations with some debt rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's over the last few months. They're obviously very interested in how the local economy and the local governments here are going to respond after Helene, and fund balance is one of the measures they look at in terms of how we're responding and meeting our budget objectives. And then finally, because revenues are going to be constrained, and we're really, at this point, not projecting a lot of growth in our sales taxes or property taxes next year, we're going to ask the question, should a property tax rate increase be considered in fiscal year 26 to raise revenue to fund employee compensation, offset some of the revenue losses we're seeing from Helene, and then to maintain our fund balance policy objectives. Okay, just quickly a recap of last year's budget process. Again, it proved to be a very challenging budget process for a number of reasons, primarily because of the slowdown in our revenue growth and the continued inflationary pressures on our personnel costs. And I'm just going to hit some of the highlights here for you all from last year's budget. Council did adopt the budget on June 11th. It was a 4-3 vote on the budget. It did include a small property tax rate increase of 0.63 cents, and that was to fund compensation adjustments that were made near the end of the budget process. For the second year in a row, the budget did include a significant use of fund balance, just under $8 million to balance the budget, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that some more on an upcoming slide. We did see some continued cost increases in personnel costs outside of salaries. So healthcare costs continue to go up. State retirement system is requiring local government, were and is still requiring local governments to put in additional money into that system as well. Those same two cost increases that we had in this year's budget, we're going to talk about those because they're going to be in part of next year's budget discussion as well. And because of all the inflationary pressures around salaries and benefits, that left very little room for additional increases outside of personnel costs. So operating budgets for most departments last year were generally held flat. We were able to add a few limited number of new positions, and those are mostly in our enterprise funds. Again, a reminder, the $80 million GO bonds were introduced and passed in November. And then that last bullet, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on an upcoming slide as well, we did message as a part of the budget process last year that we looked at our 5-year forecast and we looked at the fact that we had been using fund balance to balance the budget for a couple of years. We projected that there would have to be a property tax rate increase, and that would likely be in the budget, the fiscal year 26 budget that we're talking about today, to help us get away from using fund balance and also to fund the debt service on the GO bonds. So just to go a little bit deeper on 3 of the key things from the budget process last year. Again, I've mentioned compensation. Just wanted to highlight again some of the investments that we made in employee pay last year. The total cost of those were about $6.6 million. We made some pretty significant increase or adjustments to pay both in the fire department and in the police department as well for firefighters and sworn police officers. We also increased pay for regular employees as well. It was a 4.11% increase for most regular employees, but we did structure it in a way where folks at the lower end of the pay scale received a higher increase and ended up with an increase of around 6.3%. So again, pretty significant investment in our compensation in the current budget cycle, or in the last year's budget cycle. And then to go a little bit deeper on fund balance, again, it was the second year in a row that we had appropriated a significant amount of fund balance. Just to kind of show you all where we were at with the adoption of the budget, we currently, at the start of this fiscal year, had a fund balance of just under 16%, 15.9%. As a reminder, our goal there is, our policy goal is 15%. As we go through the slides today and the conversation about budget saving strategies, what our goal is with those saving strategies, particularly again with the revenue losses we've had this year, is to be able to end the year in a balanced budget situation so that our fund balance at the end of this fiscal year doesn't drop any further than that 15.9% that we're at right now. And then finally, again, a reminder of that 5-year forecast. This year was supposed to be a revaluation year for Buncombe County, so all property was going to be revalued, and staff was going to recommend to City Council a tax rate increase, both to cover the GO bonds and the debt service that we're eventually going to have to pay on those, and also to move us away from a situation where we have to use fund balance to balance the budget each year. That initial forecasted property tax increase was just under 6 cents and would have been an impact of about $275 a year on an average residential taxpayer's bill. And the one thing I would mention on this slide, because we're going to show you all some updated numbers toward the end of the presentation today, is that these numbers were based off of the revaluation. So we assumed that the county would move ahead. We assumed that property values would be higher than they are currently. And so all the projections that we made and presented to you all last year were based off of the fact that we assumed there would be a property revaluation this year. That's not taken place. So we've gone back and recalculated the numbers, and we'll show you all the property tax increases based on current year value later on. All right, so I think I'm going to stop there. I'll take any questions on what I've presented so far, and then I'm going to hand the mic off to Lindsay for the next section. Okay. Okay.
I think this one's working, yes? Is this mic working? Yes, awesome. Oh. All right, thanks, everyone. Okay, so Tony gave a good briefing on what happened during last year's budget process, and now I'm going to talk to y'all about what has changed since then. So first, we're going to start with some economic indicators that we're tracking over here. So taking a look at unemployment, that yellow dotted line is 2023, and then the blue line is 2024. So you can see that huge increase in unemployment that happened in October due to Helene. And as you can see, it's steadily coming down, so that's a great sign, but I think still an open question how quickly that will come down to normal levels. So it's something that we're watching. Next, we're going to take a look at occupancy tax collections. So this is what we use to take a look at what's happening in our tourism industry. And again, not surprising, a huge decrease in October right after Helene, well, September and October after Helene, and it is slowly increasing. Again, a good sign, but still not quite to pre-storm levels. And here's some sales tax numbers. So we get these numbers on a bit of a lag. So right now, November is the latest data we have. So you can see even before the storm in July and August, we were decreased compared to the prior year. And then you see that large decrease due to the storm in September and October. But as you can see, it's bounced back pretty well as of November, so that's great to hear, but it still leaves us with that hole of what we didn't collect in those months that people didn't come visit and nobody bought things. So yeah, year to date, we're looking at 6.5% decrease from the previous year. So now we're going to dig into how those indicators have affected our budget and how Helene has affected our budget, starting with what we're spending, and then we'll go into the revenue side of things. So starting with spending, we have been spending a lot more money due to Helene and trying to get back to help with the recovery process. So far, we've spent about $7.9 million with another $8 million under contract in all funds except water. And then in the water fund itself, we've spent $5.5 million and another $15 million under contract. And we've also spent about $5 million in overtime and extra pay expenses across all funds for people working on recovery efforts. And so far, thanks to FEMA's expedited public assistance program, we've received almost $10 million of that. And of all these numbers you'll see here on this slide, we are expecting 100% of them to be FEMA reimbursed through FEMA. Here's that information in a chart form. So basically what it boils down to is we've spent $41.5 million so far on hurricane recovery. And again, all of this we are expecting to be covered by FEMA. So it's good. We've been spending more, but we're expecting to recoup the costs from those expenses. Now we're going to take a look at the revenue side of things. So we are expecting losses in revenue in almost all of our funds this year. So starting with water, we're expecting $7 to $8 million loss in the water fund because the city did not charge for services for a couple of months after the storm. We are also expecting a $2 to $2.5 million revenue loss in the parking fund because, again, we didn't charge for services for a couple of months. There were also some events canceled at Harrah's, leading us to a $1.5 to $2.5 million loss in revenue there. And in the transit fund, we're expecting a small loss from not charging for fares for a little bit there. And something else to note there is that we usually take almost $1 million from the parking fund and transfer it to the transit fund to cover expenses there. If the parking fund isn't able to meet their own expenses, there's a danger they won't be able to transfer that funding to the transit fund. So that's another area that we're monitoring. So switching over to the general fund, and actually I'm going to turn this over to Tony so he can wow you with his expertise on property tax collections.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. Okay, I don't know if my microphone's on or not. But yeah, we did just want to go through in a little bit more detail the property tax data. And some of this, we've gotten some questions as we've talked to y'all recently from the mayor in particular about wanting to make sure folks kind of understand the property tax cycle and how it works, when the bills go out, what the values are based on, et cetera, et cetera. So the bills, so for the current fiscal year, so for fiscal year 2024, 2025, the property tax revenue that we're getting at the city is based on values that Buncombe County determined as of January 1, 2024. So the values are based on, again, property values from, the bills are based on property values from a little over a year ago now at this point. So the county took those values from January 2024. They mailed out property tax bills in August of 2024, and those property tax bills had a due date of January 2025. So the bills were mailed out before Helene hit, and folks began paying those bills And again, they had a due date of January 2025. So usually around this point in the year, we have a pretty good idea of how our property tax collections are doing. And we talked to the county, and as of the end of January, they had collected 96.26% of the total property tax levy for the year, which you can see by comparison to where we were January 2024, we're pretty close. So collections so far have been similar to what we see in most years. So where that leaves us right now, and again, this is where we're at pretty much every year around this time. We have about $3 million in city property taxes that are uncollected at this point. Now, the big unknown moving forward from now through the end of this fiscal year is how much of that $3 million that's still outstanding are we going to collect? And again, that's really going to impact our revenue estimates for this year. Typically, by the end of June, the county has collected almost 100%. I think it's 99.8% of property taxes. So usually, almost all the uncollected revenue at this point is collected by the end of the year. This year, county staff is not as sure, and they think collections probably will be down at the end of the year, but by how much, they don't really know. So what we have done in working with them is we've estimated right now that we think we're going to come in under budget by about $1.5 million on property taxes. So we think about roughly half of the outstanding amount will be collected, but there will remain a fairly significant amount uncollected this year when compared to previous years. So I'll turn that back over to Lindsay.
All right, moving on to sales tax, another big chunk of our general fund revenue. So as I mentioned before, this is reported on a 3-month lag. And as we saw in that chart, October was down by 14%, but November was down by 1.5%. So that's great. But again, still expecting to feel the hit from that couple of months that we were pretty significantly below collections. So we're expecting 4.1 million in revenue loss there. And of course, there's other ways the city gets revenue from fees and charges, development services, park fees, nature center, ABC revenue, and we're expecting losses in those as well. And the way this is different from the expense side we were talking about earlier is that FEMA does not cover revenue loss. So anything that happens here to decrease our revenues, there's very limited options for getting that money back. There is some state and federal loan programs that we're looking at, but they're loans, so a little bit different, and we're just kind of still in the process of exploring those and applying to them. So unclear what the status of those are at this point.
I have a question. Do we know what was going on even before Helene that revenue was down in those 3 months?
So I'll start, and Tony can probably add from his expertise, but I think before this year, there had been kind of a large increase in the sales tax, just like good times, basically. And what we were seeing is that it was starting to level off, just as was happening kind of throughout the country. So I think, I mean, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we were super surprised there.
No, what you said was spot on, Lindsay. It was something that was going on statewide. So it wasn't just here in Asheville, but statewide sales tax revenues were down. And some of it, like Lindsay said, kind of was a result of things have grown a lot in the last few years. Things had kind of leveled off, and so growth rates had leveled off to the point where we're actually seeing some declines statewide even. So
One of the things that's been coming up in our ABC board meetings is changes in spending habits. Some of that is probably due to inflation. One of the things we're noticing is that the types of bottles that people are purchasing are the less expensive bottles. Another factor that we've been tossing around is that because North Carolina allowed sports betting, that there may be an unintended impact in where folks are spending some of their more flexible dollars.
I'll add too that we've been seeing interesting trends in the market nationally and in the state, particularly with COVID. So if we really consider what COVID did for a good chunk of American spending habits, I mean, you kind of said it in a casual way, which I love, of like, everyone was in good time spending mode, everyone bought a new home office, what have you. So that was a unusual high. And then there was also a tremendous amount of local and regional travel, which Asheville very much benefited from, as people were not going to flying markets. And so I think that we were fortunate to not be tremendously impacted in our sales tax in particular post-COVID, but I think there's a sentiment that there was some normalizing or levelizing post-COVID that we were starting to feel in 2024 as well.
I'll add, I remember both the TDA and the airport board speaking to international travel starting to finally pick back up after COVID, and to expect somewhat of a lull.
Yeah, thanks for all of those additional points. All right, so looking at the numbers, we're expecting a $5.4 million deficit in the general fund and a $7.6 million deficit in the water resources fund, with some other decreases in parking, HERAs, and transit services. We're not expecting any losses right now in the stormwater or street cut funds. And so we'll kind of dig into that top general fund number a little bit to show kind of where it's coming from, but I think you guys have seen these numbers on the previous slide. So $1.5 million loss in property taxes, $4.1 million in sales tax, and then there's some a $1 million loss in fees and charges, and then there's some positives there based on the way that we budgeted a little bit more conservatively in intergovernmental and investment earnings. So overall, we're looking at a $5.4 million loss in the general fund. So where we are is we're looking at this loss in revenue. If we continue to spend at the same rate that we were before, pre-COVID, pre-Helene, lots of emergencies happening, then we're going to run into a situation where our revenues are no longer expected to cover what we're spending. So to kind of help with this situation, staff has begun implementing some saving strategies that we're going to discuss with you today. So we've instituted a hiring review process where all requests to fill vacancies are going through this new committee that we've set up. Whoops. Yes. And so we're kind of taking a little bit of extra scrutiny through all of our hiring processes just to make sure that we're hiring smartly. We're also going to recommend suspending the annual contribution to the Other Post-Employment Benefit, or OPEB, trust fund. And just to explain this, it's a trust fund that the city puts money into for a future scenario where we maybe have some retirement benefits that need to be paid out. However, we've spoken to our actuarial team, and it looks like we're in a very good position with what's already in the fund, and they've recommended that we can suspend our annual payment to the fund for both this year and for next year and still have sufficient funding to keep that fund whole. So
About how much is that?
how much is the contribution?
Yes.
We contribute $1.6 million each year to the fund at this point. So that's 1.3 in the general fund, and then the remainder, 300,000 in other funds. We'll see that on the next slide too. So we're also suspending training and travel, although we do have exceptions in place for folks who need to do specific trainings that are related and required to their job. And there's also some recovery-specific travel we're allowing to go through. And lastly, my staff worked with all departments to go through their budgets line by line and get some one-time budget reductions. And we will see some details of that on a later slide as well. All right, so at this point, we've been able to identify about $5 million in savings. And so you'll see that first line for personnel costs, that's the $1.3 million contribution to the OPEB trust fund. There may be some additional personnel savings due to our hiring committee process, but we haven't been able to quantify those at this point. And then operating costs, we have about $3.7 million that we've identified working in partnership with all departments. And on the next slide, we'll get into the details of what that makes up. So here's kind of a look at how we got to that 1.5 million. So about 1.5 million of that is delaying or reducing purchases. And again, we worked with departments to figure out what made the most sense here. There's that great OPEB contribution decrease, 1.3 million. There's about 1.1 million decrease in contracted services. $500,000 we were able to get from the suspension of training. And we have about 0.4 million in reduction for city-funded grants, and 0.2 million for some Helene-related disruptions for services that weren't happening due to the storm. And lastly, about just $100,000 for service reductions.
Can you give me an example of a city-funded grant?
Sure, so the city-funded grants is reducing funding for the strategic partnership grants and the neighborhood matching grants. And what we did there is kind of matching budget to what has been spent in previous years. So for neighborhood matching grants, it's not cutting the program entirely, it's leaving the same amount of funding that's typically used every year.
And give me an example of Helene-related disruptions.
So that Helene-related disruptions number is a decrease in pool funding, since most pools are closed, and so the maintenance costs are less. And it's also a decrease in the temp seasonal funding for the nature center, since the nature center is closed and they don't need like ticket takers, for example. Right, happy to answer any more questions on this. I think we're going to pause for questions soon anyways. We can come back to it. Great, so as the city is going through doing day-to-day operational work, we also want to make sure that we're staying focused on some of our big citywide priorities. So here is the list of projects and programs that we're really trying to make sure that we carry across the finish line as we work towards the end of the fiscal year, which is just a few months away. So I'll just read it out for the record. Council retreat, check. Helene recovery, obviously a big one with lots of mini sub-bullets, so, and obviously will be ongoing past the end of the fiscal year. Bond implementation and capital projects, budget development, budget adoption, bid implementation, council committees and boards and commissions, HR audit implementation, reparations, and a city manager recruitment. So just to summarize so far, the whole story of FY25. So in the beginning, the FY25 budget process was very challenging due to slow revenue growth and inflation. Tropical Storm Helene further created major impacts to the local economy and to the city's budget. We've spent a lot so far to help the city recover, and we are expecting FEMA reimbursement for those costs to date. And we had revenue losses that were significant, and we aren't at this point expecting to get reimbursed from those. And staff has identified some saving strategies, which we discussed, to kind of position us for a good place closing out FY25 and preparing us for the upcoming FY26 budget cycle. Questions, thoughts? All right, I'm going to hand it.
For our budget work session, can we get some more detail, maybe at the percentages or which category for the city grants, strategic partnership funds, and neighborhood grants? But I also thought we talked about the property tax mitigation was also being paused. No longer?
Yeah, I'm happy. So that program was not paused. I think there was some confusion about that from a previous council meeting. We've actually, the county's in the process of first of all, it is a county program. The city contributes to the program, and the county's in the process of doing those grants this year. We got some updated information, I think was in a council memo response a few weeks ago about the number of city participants. I think it was around 215 city taxpayers that participated last year in the program. I think that number is actually up closer to 300 this year. But that program's still going on. It's still operating based on the criteria that the county had in place prior to the storm. So, and we will budget that for next year as well. So.
Good, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
We're going to turn it over to Tony to talk about FY26.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. So I'm going to try to not have an accident with the microphone this time. All right, so if we're talking about this in terms of chapters of a story, we've been through chapter 1 and chapter 2 already. So now we're coming to chapter 3, and that's the outlook for next year and the capital planning piece that Jade is going to touch upon. So I'm going to get things started off. So you're going to hear us talk about this a lot as we go through the budget process, that we're really looking at this from the perspective of challenges and opportunities. And the challenges obviously are pretty clear. We've got resource issues, resource constraints in our regular operating budget due to the impact of Helene. We're still going to have those unavoidable cost increases for employee health insurance and state mandated retirement, just like we did last year. But then in terms of opportunities, obviously we do have significant funds that are going to be flowing into the community. The first of which was the $225 million from the CDBG-DR program. And so we're going to look to those outside resources and partnerships to help fund some of the priorities and council priorities and recovery priorities that we might normally be talking about funding through the regular operating budget. And then we're obviously still hopeful that in addition to the CDBG-DR money, that we're going to get additional state and federal funding to assist with recovery and then potentially offset revenue loss. Lindsay mentioned some of the loan programs that are out there right now. We're hoping to get some additional information and additional opportunities around those as we move forward as well. And then as I mentioned earlier, and Jade's going to go into some detail on, our 5-year capital spending plan is obviously being revised after Helene to include the key recovery projects that we're going to be undertaking over the next few years, the GO bond projects that were already planned, and the regular CIP projects that are already in the works as well. All right, so just kind of a reminder of the budget process and kind of the timeline for it. Obviously, we are in the priority setting stage, which is really what you all are doing yesterday and today at the council retreat. As we move forward over the next few months, we'll start having work sessions with you all. We'll start making some final decisions around the budget. We'll come to you all in early May with the city manager's proposed budget. You all will have approximately 4 to 6 weeks to consider that budget, and then we'll come back for budget adoption in late June, and then the new fiscal year will start in July. I would say on here, and we have a detailed calendar later as well, but there's going to be 2 opportunities for the community to come speak in relation to the budget. The first one's actually coming up at your next city council meeting, kind of a pre-budget or an early budget opportunity for the community to comment on their budget priorities, and then they'll have the regular public hearing on the budget in late May after we put together the proposed budget and presented that to you all. As usual, we highlight to you all our guiding principles, and those aren't different this year. We want to develop a budget that maintains our essential service delivery, enhances customer value, and is in strategic alignment with the priorities that you all set and the priorities of the community and staff as well. So we did want to drill down just a little bit further this year, again, because it's an unusual budget process, and so in addition to those real high-level guiding principles, we wanted to talk about some other kind of key themes that we are thinking about as we go through the budget process this year as well. And the first is that with this budget we're developing, we will continue to provide funding to maintain the city's core services. So, there's no employee reductions, no layoffs, anything like that that we're going to be recommending for consideration as a part of this budget process. We do, however, want to make sure as we go through the budget that we minimize any cost increases to residents and businesses as we recover from Helene. We want to look toward, as I mentioned earlier, one-time revenue sources as much as we can through CDB, GDR, and FEMA to fund some of the council and community recovery priorities. And then that last bullet point, I mentioned a little bit earlier about the debt rating agencies and their look at us after the storm and their interest in how we move forward fiscally. So we want to make sure we develop a budget that is fiscally responsible and allows us to maintain our financial metrics and our strong credit ratings. All right, so before we kind of get into some of the details of our projection, we always want to show you all kind of the major drivers of our budget, particularly on the general fund side. And so this is a chart you all have seen often, and again, it's just the key point here is really just a reminder that in our general fund budget, the vast majority of our revenue really comes from two sources, and that's property taxes and sales taxes. It's about 75% of our budget, and obviously those are the two that have been pretty heavily impacted by Helene. And then again, on the expense side, just a reminder there that by far and away the largest part of our expense budget in the general fund is our people. We're a people-centric organization, so personnel costs are about 64% of our total budget. So kind of getting into the forecast piece of our budget for next year, that first bullet point, given all we've said so far, it's probably not surprising, but our general fund revenue outlook is very uncertain at this point, but we are anticipating that both property and sales taxes are likely to remain down next year and below what we had budgeted in the current fiscal year. Those unavoidable cost increases I mentioned, just kind of putting a number with those, we do anticipate those will be about a $2.5 million increase in general fund expenses next year, and that's about a 10 to 11% increase in our healthcare costs is what's projected. And then the state retirement increase is somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 8%, and that's something the state has required local governments to put more money into the retirement system each of the last 10 or 15 years. So that's kind of an ongoing thing.
And there's no bargaining there, since they know our circumstance?
No, on the state retirement for sure, there is no bargaining. They tell local governments what we have to put in, and we have to put it in, so.
Can I rephrase that?
Sure.
Is there lobbying we could do? Bargaining is a different conversation, right?
So I would say lobbying, yes, absolutely. I think it wouldn't impact this year's amount. I think moving forward, because the group at the state level that meets to decide contribution rates has actually already met and approved rates for next fiscal year. But moving forward, because there are planned increases at each year moving forward as well. So I think if the state government folks can hear from locals about how that's impacting their budget, I think that would be helpful, yes. So we do hope to utilize, Lindsay mentioned our OPEB trust fund and how we're using it this year to help offset some of the revenue losses. We also are going to plan to use some of that money, or all of that money probably next year, to help offset some of those increases. So hopefully the net increase will be something less than the $2.5 million if we're able to utilize the OPEB trust money to offset some of the healthcare cost increases. As I mentioned earlier, without additional resources in the budget, it's going to be challenging to provide employee salary increases. And then it's also possible that as we move into fiscal year 26, once we kind of see where our revenues are, we may have to continue the hiring review committee and also some of those other budget saving strategies that Lindsay talked about earlier as well.
Tony, can you talk a little bit about how you got to the conclusion that sales tax is likely to be less than budgeted last year? I mean, we've now heard the airport say that pre-Helene travel levels have returned. We saw that in November, sales tax actually went back to the 1.4 reduction. And now we know there's significant increases in the cost of goods that's coming our way, and thereby the sales tax on top of them. I'm just wondering, is this like a conclusion we draw because we're worried, or do we have advisors or state level, like, hey, this is likely going to happen to you? how did we get there?
Yeah, so it's mainly us kind of looking, so that slide that Lindsay showed earlier, so through the first 5 months of the year, we're down 6.5%, right? So for us to get back to kind of that normal level, we're gonna have to see some pretty significant growth over the next 6 months, 5 to 6 or 6 to 7 months. So I think we and based on what we've been hearing from other local governments across North Carolina, we aren't looking for that kind of bounce back right now. But again, there's a lot of unknown about this, and so, we're gonna be tracking that over the next few months and updating it. And if we see we are recovering faster and that we can budget more, obviously we will. But I guess at the moment, what we would say is we're trying to not be overly optimistic, especially given what we were even seeing before Helene hit, so.
And then, I think we talked about this a little bit in our one-on-one, but, so the OPEB trust fund, it's like a balance, almost like we only have to contribute such that it's below a certain level, right?
Yeah, so it's money that's set aside to pay future retiree health care costs. It's something the city started 10 to 15 years ago. There was a new governmental accounting standards ruling that came out that led a lot of local governments to start putting that on into their budget. And we've been contributing every year. And we started, I think, at $200,000 a year, and we built up to where we put $1.6 million. So right now we have, I think, somewhere around $25 million in that fund. We haven't started drawing any money out of it yet to pay retiree health care costs. So we got with our actuarials. They took a look at it. They said, you're in a healthy place right now. You can't do away permanently with putting money into that fund because you are eventually going to have to start drawing upon it. But if you want to take a year or 2 year delay, stop the payments, and then ease back into putting money into that fund, that is something that is financially sustainable. So
I want to make sure I understood that right. We have about $25 million in that fund, and we haven't spent any of it yet.
we haven't spent any of
And we
it to
keep
date.
contributing over $1 million to it.
That's correct.
And we do not have to?
So,
I mean, I get
we're-
that
yeah.
there's a requirement at some level, right?
yeah, so you're not legally required to. So what
Not
happens is-
legally required to.
Right,
Okay.
so it goes on your balance sheet though, and so it's one of the things, again, that affects, when we do our year-end financial report and we put that on our balance sheet, it affects our financial numbers, it affects our debt ratings potentially from Standard & Poor's. And we're still, one way that actuarials look at this is they do a computation to determine if you are 100% funded for your future liability. And the goal is to get to that 100%
Right.
funded for your future liability. Pretty much, I don't know of any local government that has reached that level, and we haven't reached that level as well. And so that's why we keep putting money into it each year.
Do we know where that is, that number?
We do, I don't know what it.
Okay. So
yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is if I saw it on the, the reduction of this current year. And what I'm seeing now is that instead of giving it 1.6 this year, you're talking about using it to cover increases. Okay.
Yeah,
And we haven't drawn down from it, but we are legally able to.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we're looking at for this year and next year.
And yeah, the next 2 years, correct. Yeah.
I am curious about the different kinds of spending that are happening in Western North Carolina because of recovery. Have we reached out to any peer cities that have survived disasters to look at what the sales tax projections are from the construction costs side?
So we haven't, and so one of the things I will say is that the sales tax system here in North Carolina is very unique. And so a good portion of the sales tax revenue we get here actually is not from the city of Asheville itself. It's either from Buncombe County or from the rest of the state. And so it's really hard sometimes when you start thinking about and trying to reach out to, let's say, New Orleans or somewhere like that went through a
Or
major.
Houston that went through a big
Yeah, or
hurricane?
went through a major, because their structure is most likely very different than what we see here. But I will say that construction costs and construction spending is actually a big part of our sales tax revenue. So there is some potential there that we will begin to see as the economy starts recovering here and there starts to be a lot of spending that could impact our sales tax revenue in a positive way moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
We're just not sure how much or when, so.
Yeah, and a lot of the kind of caveats that we have in this presentation is we are looking at and basing our I guess, communication with you all based on the information that we have today. That's why we said this is evolving. Hopefully, we'll get better, more refined numbers as we go through the process. Hopefully, in March, I believe we should have much better information, particularly on sales tax. And I know that it kind of sounds like that, local government is so, and Deborah and Tony, you guys are conservative. We are cautious, not overly cautious, I would suggest to you, but we think we are recommending, providing you with information that will maintain a fiscally responsible budget for this community. And that's the approach that we take.
Yeah, and we're providing the best information we have and the best projections that we can provide today. Now, when we come back to you all in a month, it's going to be different. Numbers are going to be different. I can guarantee you all that. So there's always uncertainty. This year, there's way more uncertainty. So we just all got to be prepared for that. So, okay, just a couple other key points. We do anticipate asking departments to keep their budgets flat next year. And there may have to be some reductions outside of core services to balance the budget. And then that last piece, again, I've said this a couple times, we want to make sure, Ms. Campbell just said this, that we budget conservatively. We are currently a AAA rated city with Standard & Poor's and Moody's, and what that means is that they rate our debt. So every time we go out and issue debt, we get a debt rating. We're AAA rated right now, which is the highest debt rating you can receive. And so what that means is when we go out and borrow money, we get the lowest interest rates for our community that we can possibly get. When Helene hit, obviously it had a lot of impact on the local economy. And Standard & Poor's and Moody's we've been in several phone calls with them over the last few months about what that means for us and our budget and for the local economy. Because their rating is not just based on City of Asheville and our budget, but it's based on our local economy as well. And so they have some concerns about how the local area might bounce back from Helene, and so they've put the city on what's called a negative outlook. They didn't downgrade our rating, but they put us on a negative outlook, which means they're going to be watching us closely as we go through our budget process and looking at our financials over the next 6 to 12 months to see how the community bounces back, how the city deals with it from a budgetary perspective as well. So we've got to keep that in mind as we go through the budget process.
Could you share a little bit more? Do they have criteria for this negative outlook versus downgrading, and just kind of like, are they going to look at how we pass the budget and be like, just help me understand a little bit more if there are set criteria or how formal that quote unquote negative outlook is?
Yeah. So well, first I can say, so the outlook is very formal, obviously. They do a press release, and they do have criteria that they look at. It has been very interesting over the last few months. We've had conversations. We have two debt rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's. We've talked to them about our general fund. We've talked to them about our water fund. Various members of staff have been on those calls. They're very different in their approach. I think Moody's is very, they focus on kind of past history. We have a past history of strong financial management. We have a past history of strong staff continuity around budget and things like that. Standard & Poor's is based way more on, their evaluation was based a lot more on what they are seeing in the media about reports about where we're at and the level of destruction here. And sometimes we felt like, or I felt like we were in some ways fighting a losing battle with Standard & Poor's from the very first phone call, because I think they had formed an opinion about the level of destruction here based on what they had seen in the media that we found very hard to overcome as we went through the conversations with them. When we tried to explain, yes, there has been a lot of impact here, a lot of damage, but we're recovering, and they seem to already have their minds made up before we even got to the end of that process.
Well, if they would like to come, I'm sure all of us on council would be, I say that playfully, but I'm not.
We talked to our financial advisors.
We'd be happy to host.
DEC and Associates, we discussed with them if they would like to come the first week of March and visit with us, and they declined. They said they would rather They would rather wait till we were further along in the recovery process before they come, so.
Tony, thank you. One thing that would help me as we get further down the road in the budgeting process each year is, you know, we're so protective of our great rating, right? I would love to better understand the math behind that and where that risk is financially of falling to a AA, I guess is the next.
Yeah.
Just so we know in our minds where that crunch piece is.
Yeah, and happy to have our financial associates, the DEC and associates come and talk to you all about that as well, so. Okay, so moving on, so kind of moving from general fund to water fund.
Can I go back one?
Yeah.
I'm really, that's pretty concerning information to hear that S&P is putting us on a negative outlook, that they understand. Those are two very powerful words. Am I overinflating that? Or is that that's a pretty big yellow flag they just raised at us? And so for this budget, we need to be really aware that they're throwing out a yellow flag of risk. Am I picking up the gravity, or am I taking it out of proportion?
No, I was gonna say, no, I think that's absolutely a great way
Okay.
of characterizing it as a yellow flag. You know, it's not a red flag. They didn't downgrade us. They could have, but they didn't. But they're essentially saying, we're gonna watch and see what happens over the next 6 to 12 months. So.
And that's why we put this in the context of, you know, we have these two rating agencies that are looking at us. One has kind of raised a yellow flag. Here's what we think are the areas that will have the most significant impact, like the water rates, the fund balance.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we kind of, sort of got dinged because we had to dip back into that balance so significantly last year. And I think it's just, you know, intuitive that they would think, well, with all this destruction, they probably are going to have to dig deeper into savings in order to manage through the next fiscal year. I think that we are, again, taking this slow and steady. We are being very intentional in terms of getting really good data for us to be able to make good decisions that does not, for example, the increase in employee pay. After a year that we have had, yes, we want to increase employee salaries, but we also want to do it in a responsible way. And so that's what we're struggling with. We want to do it in a way, one of those things said, we would mitigate impact on business and property owners. So just that balancing act of how do we do and achieve all of these mutual goals, and there are a lot of them this year, and be intentional, again, lessen impacts, and for us, and we need you all's patience, and we talked about this yesterday in terms of council roles, is that you be nimble, you be flexible as we get information. We may have started going right, we may have to go left, depending upon, again, the data, information that we get. And we hope that you all have the confidence in staff that we're giving you our best.
I just want to do a quick time check, but are we doing okay? Okay, all right. Because we have 5 more minutes. Oh, whew, all right. You're kidding, right? All right, we will move fast. All right, so just quickly on water, and again, this really ties into what we were just talking about, is we'd begun a 3-year planned phase-in of some rate adjustments in the current fiscal year. Again, with the plan to continue to do that this upcoming budget year and the following year. And those rate adjustments were about a 7.5% rate increase for residential users, some higher adjustments for other commercial classes. And again, this was kind of a right sizing of rates based off the rate study that got done. And we were going to recommend to you all that we move ahead with those rate increases. Again, partly it's obviously to keep the water fund well funded. There's a lot of capital improvements that are going to be made in the water fund. We want to make sure we have the funding for that. But we also have to maintain those financial metrics with our debt covenants and our rating agencies. And again, just like with the general fund, S&P put our water fund on a credit watch. And so we want to make sure, that's one of the things they're looking at. Will the city move ahead with its planned rate increases? And if we don't, then that very well could end up with a downgrade of the water debt. We will be proposing no other fee increases for some of those major funds that residents see, such as stormwater, solid waste, or parking. All right, so again, I just want to kind of remind you all again that these are the key decisions or discussion points that we wanted to make sure that we highlighted for today. In the interest of time, I won't read through these again. We'll come back. I think I'll finish up my section, and maybe we'll let Jade do capital, and we'll come back and maybe talk about these as needed. But I did just want to talk a little bit about, again, a property tax increase may be necessary because, again, we used a significant amount of fund balance in the budget this year. We have a potential of seeing our revenues not bounce back to where they were as we move into next year. And then also, as we discussed, if we're going to be able to fund employee salary increases next year as well, a tax rate increase would likely be necessary. So and I have a chart on the next slide that I'll go to, but the key thing from this slide is that for every 1 cent increase in the property tax rate, that generates about $2 million in revenue in the general fund. So kind of keeping that in mind, I'll go to the next slide. And again, this is in chart format. So an increase to get us out of using fund balance would be about a 3.88 cent tax rate increase. And you can see the impact there in the second and third columns to your average residential taxpayer. And the average residential value is about $350,000 right now, so we applied the tax rate to that value. That middle row is, again, if revenues don't come back, and again, this is really one of the key things we're going to be focusing on over the next few months and updating you all on. Hopefully they will, and hopefully we'll be at a point where we don't have a revenue loss for next year. But if we are, then that would be the tax rate increase, 2.7 cents to offset that. And then finally, we want to just kind of give you all an idea of how much of an increase would be required for employee compensation increases. So in the general fund, every roughly 1% increase in employee compensation equates to $1 million. So that would be roughly a half-cent tax rate increase. And again, what we modeled here is just a 1% increase. But just it's to show you all what the impact would be. Obviously, if you wanted to do, let's say, a 2% or 3% increase, that would be 1.5 cents on the tax rate. But again, just as some examples to show you all some scenarios, what's on the screen would be about a $249 a year increase for city taxpayers, or about $20 a month.
And I want to make it crystal clear. That slide, can you go back to that slide for just a minute? Is not a recommendation. It is just an example, just for you all to get your arms around essentially numbers, not a recommendation.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Tony or Deborah, what percentage is the usual, like just a regular cost of living adjustment? What percentage is that? Is that 3% usually?
Yeah, so
That would be 1 point.
So 3% would kind of be, over time. We've done more the last few years, more than 3%. But kind of if you look back before COVID, we were doing something in the neighborhood of 3% a year, yes.
And we are working and talking to, at least I am, other city managers and town managers and county manager within the region, within Buncombe County, just to see what they're looking at, or if they are looking at increases. And everybody's struggling right now in terms of finding the actual recommendations, so we're all kind of muddling through right now.
And I don't see a line item here to recoup the first payments for the GO bond, because we were given a delay. I still would like to understand the long-term impact.
Yeah.
Does that just mean we get 21 years to pay instead of 20? And I don't need that, but just understanding what that is.
Yeah.
But where I'm going is, in FY '27, we're gonna have to start paying for that investment too.
Correct, yeah, and I know we're pushed for time here. So the quick answer to that is, we were gonna tie that tax rate increase to the revaluation, so we wanted to wait till the new values are in place, before we implemented that tax rate increase. And we have a little bit of time because we're probably not gonna issue the first of that debt until the following fiscal year after some spending has taken place.
And we're making that alignment because we're, again, trying to mitigate the impact of the increase.
Yes.
So if
Yeah.
value goes up, then that means there's additional revenue for us. We can have less of a tax increase.
As we move forward to the budget work sessions, just so we can have a whole conversation and tie together loose threads, I know there will be a conversation about living wages, so can we include some numbers around that? Living wage, I think it's $22.10 an hour. 23 now, thank you.
I'll share a couple questions. I don't expect answers now, for future. Are there other items like the OPEB that are voluntary contributions? This fiscal year that we're finishing, we're making some well-needed cuts and, reductions. Is any of that carrying into next year, like the hiring review? And then a question around just, so we're all clear, whether or not any DR money can cover any of this. And then lastly, just a suggestion, since this is all public-facing, maybe some of these slides should say, this is not yet a recommendation. These numbers are likely to change, just so, once we put it out there, we can't rewrite that narrative.
Good point, thank you.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, members of council, Jade Dundas, Capital Management Director. Now that I have 30 seconds of Tony's a lot of time. Hang on. So we are working on developing a CIP that is actually, we presented a 5-year CIP. But right now, as we've mentioned in the past, really we're trying to get to a consistent planning document that allows us to understand what the capital improvements process looks like over a 5-year period. We had actually planned on even going to envision that a little bit further out to 10 years, but due to the hurricane and all of the recovery efforts, we had to keep that at 5 years. But essentially, we are working with three different spending plans at this point. Recovery is one of the obvious ones. GO bond, which was approved in November, and then our normal general fund CIP, which is the rehab and replacement of existing infrastructure. Projects will be prioritized using our financial capacity, considering our financial capacity. We'll use facility studies, capital predictor, which is a tool that we have as product of the facility studies, the PCI, Pavement Condition Index, which is just an evaluation of our pavement condition, the planning, and the various other planning studies that we have to really determine what the vision for the 5-year and eventually the 10-year CIP is. Community input and preferences is also a big driving factor in what we put into the budgets. Details on projects will be shared with council in an upcoming event. So this is really kind of you've seen some of this information, so it's a little bit of a review, and there's a bit of a preview also of what's to come. One of the important things that we are using, again, when I said the financial capacity, we're using a number in the general fund CIP of approximately $20 million per year. So that's across all of our long-term debt. And so being able to really understand that that's the capacity for us, and being able to plug projects in that fit into that annual capacity is pretty important for us to develop this plan. GO bonds and recovery-related spending are separate, although we are looking for the places where they meet and opportunities to leverage all of these projects together, which we have demonstrated through the last bond effort, opportunities for that. And then also federal and state funding for recovery and resilience would become available through FEMA, public assistance, and competitive funding processes. So again, we're looking at all avenues for funding these projects. And again, just to this is a little bit of a repeat, is that the projects we pulled from CIP requests that we've generated over the last couple of years, and then also studies that have been produced over a longer period of time, and then also collaboration between departments. The goals for developing, looking at a 5 and even a 10-year CIP is establish a long-range, predictable, yet flexible budget document. There's a storytelling aspect to this, well put together capital plans tell a story. They tell a story about the significance of the project, but they also help to remind staff and the community over time what is planned for that project and how we plan on investing in that infrastructure. Develop a system of allows for large projects to develop. We have some very large projects that we know need to be put in place. One of those, as an example, is a transit facility. In order for us to expand transit in the future, we need to start investing and looking into how we're going to develop a transit maintenance facility because we are at capacity. That was mentioned to council in Walter Ear's discussion of the facility maintenance or the facility plan. But those are things that we can't, if we're not giving attention to those in the future, we're really not going to know how they fit in. So we really wanted to make a longer range view of all of those larger expenses. Allow departments to see how the impacts of individual projects on the overall budget. So essentially what this document will also allow us to do is really understand long range on how things stack. And so you can't have, if you've got a budget capacity of $20 million a year, obviously you can't have 2 or 3 $10 million projects. So you have to program those out over time. And so that's really important for us to be able to understand how that impacts, how those impact one another and to be able to communicate that. And we create a budget process that's repeatable. And it's dependent upon us establishing a long-range plan and sticking to that long-range plan so we're not coming up with a new set of projects every year. It's really consistent over time. So switching a little bit to recovery, and so we are working to develop the scope and funding for the recovery work and understanding. I'll get the next slide will show the magnitude of the work that we're doing, of the amount of damage in individual items and how we're trying to pull those together and make them more manageable. We are advancing less complex projects. I gave this, this was mentioned in a presentation last month. More complex projects are being developed through the FEMA public assistance process. All of them will be funded through FEMA public assistance. Just some of the more complex ones need a little more time in the system and need to really go through all of the steps to ensure that we're maximizing our recovery funds. These projects will develop over the next several years and will follow the normal project development process, which includes public engagement, design, permitting. Somebody said the other day is that a lot of our planning work was done by the hurricane, right? It said now these things need to be done. But now we need to try to figure out what it is that we need, how we need to build back, the costs of building back, the design elements, and then all of the permitting associated with those. So we've got an effective process that's allowed us to move tens of millions of dollars through and develop projects. And so we're just going to have to continue to apply those processes in the future for recovery. Staff is looking for every opportunity to expedite. We know that moving as quickly as possible is important. We are working with our FEMA partners and then also with our partners from Hagerty to be able to understand how to most quickly and effectively get through the PA public assistance FEMA process. And this will help with contract and project management. So really how we're packaging projects right now, I'm sorry, I missed a bullet there. Staff is looking at opportunities to expedite and also consider multiple sites, damage items in one project. And this will just make it more efficient, and I'll show you. So essentially, when we break down the number of damaged items that we have, we're looking at 23 individual facilities, 22 parks, which is a large number of acreage. There's really different ways, excuse me, to look at all these things. 6 greenways have been impacted. And then through the public works infrastructure, there's 200 individual points of damage on streets, bridges, sidewalks, stormwater utilities. And that number alone kind of gives you the magnitude. If you're pointing at all the individual items that are damaged, it is overwhelming. So when we talk about grouping and trying to create efficiencies, it's understanding how these things all fit together so we can manage them in the most effective and a way that also considers our staffing resources and as it allows us to move things as quickly as possible. 16 points of damage at the water assets associated with the treatment facilities and distribution system. Actually, our distribution system outside of the major damage that happened near the treatment plants fared pretty well, but there are some recovery projects that need to happen at the plants. And so, again, being able to develop those, so we're not only meeting the expectations for recover and repair what was there, replace what was there, but also looking for mitigation and opportunities to be more resilient in every opportunity that we have. So a little more than 30 seconds, but there you go. Any questions? And again, we are bringing capital back in work session.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add too, so on the GO bonds, so the Local Government Commission is scheduled to hopefully approve our bonds at their March 4th meeting, and so then we'll be coming back to you all at your first meeting in March to adopt the budgets for the GO bond project. So that's a pretty exciting point, so then that'll allow Jade and his team to start with some of the process of getting those projects underway. And I know we're at time here, so I'll just quickly remind everyone that this is kind of the first step in the budget process, right? We're going to be talking to council a lot over the next few months. We do have, as I mentioned, the public comments section or agenda item on 225 coming up next week. We also have or I guess 2 weeks from now, we have a couple of work sessions currently scheduled for March. We would be coming to you all hopefully for adoption of any fees and charges changes. And again, it's probably going to be the water fund this year, or water fee this year, that we'll be discussing with you all. And then moving on through the process of bringing you all a proposed budget and then budget adoption in June. So I think I won't go through our key takeaways again in the interest of time. But that's all we have this morning. Thanks everyone for the time. And
yeah, I would close this out by saying that this presentation was attached to the email that we sent you all about the agenda. There are a few changes because we got new sales tax information, and I don't know if those changes, because it was a PDF form, so it may not have made the change. But we can, before we post it, because this presentation hasn't been posted to the public, Sage, we can make that change, that modification on that one slide to say example, not a recommendation on that slide. So hopefully that addressed that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think if we got a few minutes, I mean, I guess, yeah, I think we're good. But if we have a few minutes, I mean, if there is
any questions
or comments,
probably what we want to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Tony, you could give that presentation in your sleep.
Done it a few times.
All right. Logan, can you get me? Do you read me? All right, thanks. Deborah. Thank you. I hope that was enough time for the budget briefing. Thank you. So today's really we're going to refocus on recovery. And we've talked a lot about what we've been building yesterday. I'm just going to take a second and just review this real quick. Maybe check in with you on a couple key takeaways about your budget that are specifically impactful or important regarding recovery, because that's going to be part of what we're doing this morning. Is we're going to start handing this off to you. You're going to be doing breakout sessions around your 4 priority areas. We're going to send you after you come back from a break, we'll have you do a gallery walk, meaning you're going to look at all the information you compiled yesterday, make some notes, then we're going to send you to your stations. You're going to have an opportunity to spend about 15 or 20 minutes. We're still working on the timing. 15 or 20 minutes as a group. We're going to break you into 2 groups. We're talking about people, economy, and then later you're going to spend time talking about infrastructure and environment. Right. Yeah. So it's really an opportunity. You're going to be doing that with staff at the table as a resource for you. So that's an opportunity to have real back and forth dialogue, an opportunity to do that in a great way. But just to remind everyone what we did yesterday, your vision. Shanika, we were talking about this last night. You were reflecting on how much you really liked the vision. Rooted in resilience, rising in unity, repairing with care, and ready for tomorrow. I thought that was really good. Not quite a bumper sticker, but close, right? Yeah, there you go. The guiding principles that you really want to think of as you go through this process: community-centered, accountability and transparency, uniqueness. I love the scrappy Asheville. I don't know whoever came up with that one. That was awesome. Uniqueness. Innovation was where the scrappy Asheville was. Strength, resilience, and sustainability, and collaboration. Those are those guiding principles. The recovery priority areas that we talked about yesterday: people, economy, infrastructure, and housing. I think that spoke to you all really well. So that's how we're going to do our work today. So that's sort of the game plan. We're going to take a break in a minute. But just real quick, I just thought as we leave that tough conversation around the budget, I just wanted to capture a couple things from that conversation as you look at your recovery. Are there just a couple key takeaways that you took from your budget briefing that you think you should be thinking about as you look at recovery specifically in our conversations later this morning? Just curious if there was a couple things that came out of that. Sage, anything that hit you? Thinking about recovery? Yeah, you were. I could tell. Okay, I should have thought of that.
I'll jump in. My first thought was really appreciated the process staff is taking this year based on feedback we've all said, like teeing up here the key decisions, giving us figures that aren't recommendations for us to just understand. I feel like really well prepared to be part of that conversation and really thankful for that. And I also feel like as it relates to recovery, it's hard to say, let's think about recovery. Then let's think about the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
So even though it feels like 2 brains, I feel like the way it's folded in this retreat is we need both of those contexts.
Mm-hmm.
And so just really appreciate how it's being rolled out for us to really contribute.
That's good. Anything else, Bo? Anything you thought when you heard that and then you thought about recovery? I mean, obviously recovery, being successful in recovery is absolutely vital to your budget. But is there something, when you heard those presentations, anything that sort of hit you?
Yes, I think going back to our guiding principles, as we discuss the budget, thinking about innovation, what are the list of quote-unquote additional resources that we can look at? I think community-centered, making sure that our people are at the center of that conversation, and then collaboration between the council and staff and everyone else.
That's great. Anything else?
When I zoom in on our organization, every single one of our staff just gained an amazing amount of skills around disaster response and recovery, and is going to continue to gain those skills. So if we don't invest in them, we won't retain our folks. And then zooming out, I'm trying to make sure that I see our part as a regional partner. If we don't stabilize and diversify our economy, we won't have the same kinds of revenue that we have had in the past. And we knew that when we were talking about potential for disasters in the past, but it's here now. So that an example specifically is we were talking about at the MPO level, what is the responsibility for DOT road debris to get out of the river? Because if we don't get debris out of the river, we won't have the same kinds of environmental and outdoor tourism that we've had in the past. So there are ripple effects, and we're part of a regional partner. So while it may seem we have a plan and we're moving forward, I'm also holding that our neighbors are in worse shape in a lot of ways. And so we're connected.
Regional economic impact in the recovery process.
Yeah.
And its role in your overall economic health and budget health for the city. That's good. Anything else? We don't. Okay, awesome. All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break. You're going to come back. We'll talk about the exercise that we're getting ready to do, where you're going to spend some time looking at these in a little more detail, working with your staff at 2 breakout sessions. We'll repeat those so that you'll each touch each of the 4 during a series of breakout sessions. What else do we need to touch on real quick? Oh, yeah. When you come back and when we give you the instructions, we're going to ask you to take 5 minutes, pull out your workbooks, and just sort of walk through all the work that you've done today. Most of it's out here in the hall. Just to remind yourself of all the things that you developed that went into this yesterday as sort of data and information for the conversations that you're going to be a part of.
But again, we're going to come back before we do that.
Yeah, so come back here in 10 minutes. So what is that? Top of the hour sounds good to me. 11 o'clock, that sounds good. 11:02. All right, Deborah. All right, see you at 11:02. One. All right. In just a minute, we're going to send you to do a gallery walk, which is where we're going to ask you to gather information. We talked a minute ago about how we've been building the process, and one of the last things we're going to do is talk about a game plan for the short term. But I did want to mention something that I did not reflect on earlier, and especially after a sobering budget briefing, that impact of partners and the role that partners play. I didn't mention that and how critical that is, and increasing the impact of partners through adding capacity, representing community voices, and accessing resources. So thinking about partners, that was something else that I did not mention about the information that we gleaned from the work yesterday. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask you to take your workbooks out, go to the page. What was the title on that page? I forget. Refining priorities. That's the exercise we're getting ready to go into in a minute. But I want you to take that page with you, and we're going to do what we call a gallery walk. I'm going to ask you to take 5 minutes, and you can do it in pairs or you can do it individually. just to walk through each of those key elements that we've worked on. And they're out, I think they're all in the hallway now, right? Almost all of them.
We have a couple here in the room.
Yeah. Thinking about the key themes that you think are very critical, jot those down under each of those important discussions we had yesterday. Thinking about recovery, thinking about sort of taking this conversation to action. What are the key themes that you see in those? And you're going to take them and we're going to break you into two groups to talk about. First are people, economy, housing, and infrastructure in that order. So you're going to be in two breakouts. But right now, I want you to take 5 minutes, just go and walk around.
So we're going to do a breakout on each of the four?
Yes, ma'am, and you're going to touch each one of them.
So when
And I'll give you more details on how to do that when we come back, but yes.
So can you give an example of a key thing we might note and jot down? What are you looking for? In the gallery walk?
Oh, in the gallery walk, it's really like reflection.
Oh, you're just kind of reminding yourself of all the things we already said.
Where we've been,
Right.
so that as we get ready to move in a few minutes of where we're going.
I'm
we're just
remembering all the
regrounded
things we
what all we
just,
did.
okay, I'm following you now.
And that's for your own, it's a reminder. You're not going to be asked to present it to anyone. No judge is going to ask you, okay. All right, so.
Are you a seed or are you?
All right.
Grab a partner if you want.
I think,
Be by yourself if you want.
and we want you back in here at what time?
11:15.
11:15. That's just a quick 5 minutes.
Very quick.
Very quick. Just, yeah, we're speeding because we're trying to make up some time here. Just a couple quick things. When you walked around, it was like, oh crap, I'm so glad I looked at that and remembered. Anything?
It's okay. Just an opportunity for reflection.
I did reflect on how artistic you all are. And I was curious if
How artistic you all are.
well, I was curious, like, do you
Yeah,
print these, or are they drawings? It's actually.
Yes, sir, I am. Sorry. You got it, Logan? All right. Audio. Kim, yes, I'm sorry. I didn't see the light.
I didn't want to leave you hanging on there, especially because you did mention something. This is my 11th, I guess, city council retreat. And one of the things I was reflecting on is the cultural trend towards being aspirational. I noticed that in our language and how we dream big and we carry a lot of our neighbors' hopes with us.
Neighbors in your communities and neighbors in the region. All right. What we're going to do now is we're going to send you to these two groups, and I'm going to break. We're actually going to divide you up in a second. But wanted to talk about just real briefly, and we'll be at the stations with you. We'll go through the instructions again. But I think what you're going to be doing now is, first of all, you're going to be thinking about what success looks like around people, around economy. What success looks like. And then we're going to have you work through an exercise to put all the elements that get you to success, who and in some ways how to get to what success looks like. At the table, you're going to have your colleagues, council members, but you're also going to have both of your assistant city managers will be at each of the tables, and they will have some staff with them. And their role first is to be a resource for you in that conversation, because we're starting to operationalize a little bit here. And who does that? But the team that's here to support you. They will also have some key staff people with them, and the staff are going to take the notes. So their role is to be a resource, and they're also to be a partner in the conversation. They're going to help you as you work through it, and they're welcome to be a part of it as appropriate. And I think that's something that's really important as we go forward. Deborah will be a floater, just checking in and seeing how we can help. We will be there with you to help get the ball rolling. But we're going to start with a conversation about what success looks like. So I think, do I need any more instructions now? All right, good. I am going to tell you how we divided you all up. Let's see. All right, we're going to send folks to For people, and you're going to move over there, and Susie and Emily will be over there in that corner. And it will be Sage, Maggie, Antoinette, and Bo. So you'll start over there. And then over here, in this area right here, we'll have Esther, Shanika, and Kim right here. So Kim, you don't have to move. Makes things easier for you. All right, so with that in mind, we're just going to ask you to go ahead and move to your spaces, and Kim and Ben will, Rachel and Ben will go to with their team to support you in this conversation. So Emily and Susie over there, I'll be over here with you guys. So go. All right, we are going to shift you so the staff team stays where they are. The council members will stand up and go to the next set. You're going to swap places, and the staff are going to help sort of orient you on the conversation that just took place, and then you're going to be engaged in a conversation around that. It didn't feel like 3 hours, it felt like 5 days. No. That was good. That was really hard work. I saw a couple council members getting tired. That was hard work. That's a good sign. It's a good sign that it was hard work. All right, I'm going to tell you what we sort of shifted our game plan for today and going forward after what I thought was a really, really productive conversation and the work product that we came out with. So we were going to do, it's underneath this, a game plan coming out of this that would have captured all of this in one way or another. We've decided that these are so well populated that that's not really reasonable to do with you today. So we are going to go back and work with the staff, respond to each of these 4 categories, work with them to come back with a game plan that addresses each of those 4 categories, and then come back to the council and share that game plan as sort of a feedback loop, if you will. And I think that will be really helpful for everyone. I mean, clarity is always a good thing, and it gives them a chance to really think through. When you think about success, it's got to be we don't want to set a success that's not achievable or tangible. So we need to go back and think through it. And they'll interpret, bring information back, and get a chance to check in with you on that. So I think that's the game plan now. The other thing, what were the other things we were going to do? Deborah, we were going to talk about, sorry, I know you're running in. So we're going to take all this information. We will put it all together. We'll make sure that all the words that should be in there are in there. And we'll give it back to the council and the administration. So you'll have notes from this. That's the first thing you'll get. The second thing is we will work with the staff to refine and bring the game plan back for you to look at. Say that again? Do you want to add to that? I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. The other thing that we've talked to is getting input. Thinking about the boards and commissions. We're going to do a project with them on sort of like how they're going to go forward and how they relate to this. So that's something that the administration has asked us to do with you as well. So that's sort of the game plan going forward from here. Anything you want to add to that? Does that sound good to you, Deborah? Lots of bless yous. Sounds good? Okay. So what we're going to do right now, rather than a full-scale debrief, I'm going to ask Recovery Rachel and Aquaman. We're going to do a quick, so just take a minute. I'm going to ask them to come up here and join me to just to real quickly hit some of the key success looks likes from the sessions that we are a part of. And I will start with economy. So that's you, Ben. Yes, I think you do. Yeah, Aquaman, yeah. Woo. Hey, Logan, do you do a sound check?
Sound check, yes.
All right.
Thank you
Just
for the
key-
round of applause.
2 or 3 key successes.
2 or 3. I've misplaced my trident, so I don't have that with me, so I'm going to have to point with my hands. Dawa, you lost my trident. So this was good. Good work in economy.
Good work.
We'll talk about infrastructure later, though.
That'll be next.
That'll be next. So a lot of synergy, actually, in economy. I felt like both groups of council members were relatively in sync. What I heard, and I want to make sure I heard that we want to have a process for CDBG-DR funds to start getting those out the door in 1 year. That's what success looks like. And again, this is in the lens of economy. Go ahead. Were you? Some of the, well, I said a process to start getting it out. Yeah, I think we're trying to have the framework. It literally says process. I thought this was an interesting metric as we want to have, after a storm, some businesses are not going to make it. There's data that supports that. But I think as Asheville, our goal is to have a better survival rate than is typical. So we want to have more businesses survive the economic impact than is traditionally associated with storms. And the other piece on short term is, we scratched this out a few times, is we want to have a recovery-based implementation for our underrepresented local small businesses and make sure that we have a robust outreach and participation programs. We're trying to make sure that our recovery strategy includes underserved businesses, and that's twofold. One is businesses that contract with the city. That's one section, part of this. The other is those other more independent type businesses that may provide services. So we just want to make sure that we have a good strategy for helping those businesses be successful. And then real quick, Bo, long term, I'm just going to do this quickly, more resilient diversity in our economy, a larger, more developed contractor pool. It's important to say that we don't have a lot of contractor resources and we have a lot of work to do. And we want to leverage our partners, and we want to plan for our cultural and arts sector. And again, we want to have an increase in the percentage of underrepresented businesses that exist. So we want to have more underrepresented businesses in 3 years than we did before Hurricane Helene. So that's, again, a measurable outcome. And then finally, I think just some more general successes in terms of overall growth in the economy and then affordable and accessible business space and available supply for businesses.
You mentioned lower unemployment rate.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. And then we want to make sure, oh, yes, thank you. We want to make sure, actually, we want to have a lower unemployment rate in a year from now. So we want to make progress on getting people back to work in Asheville. Did I miss anything, council members? Does that sound? Great, thank you.
You want to just jump over to infrastructure while you're up?
Yes, that's fine.
Or or the two of you could do a dance. I don't know. That's up to you.
I'll turn it over to Recovery Rachel in a second. I think infrastructure was a little tougher for both groups, so that had a lot of debate. And I'm gonna probably summarize this at a higher level. I think consistent with the survey, council had a lot of support and interest in improving our water system. That's the way we're able to continuously provide potable water and not be vulnerable to future disruptions, to have more resilience. So definitely heard water as a priority, loud and clear. I think the other piece is in year one is just having some agreement on kind of what the plan and strategy is for infrastructure recovery, because there is so much to be done. And another really important piece I heard from council is in that first year, beyond just having a plan, we need to have some small victories. We need to bring parts of our infrastructure system back online so that our residents and visitors can have access to that. So we heard you loud and clear about not just a plan, but we need to have some small victories in year one. Transportation, sidewalks, parks, greenways. We want to show the community that we are going to get things open and begin the restoration process. But just to be, so those that are listening, there are small victories, but there are many projects that are very complex and are going to take time to figure out and deliver. Another thing I think in infrastructure was the idea of a little more preparation, and I thought we did a great job at what the emergency response looks like, what emergency communications look like, and planning for that in the future. We even talked a little bit about neighborhood-based emergency plans that can eventually fold into resilience hubs. So again, just trying to learn from our experience and be better prepared as a community in terms of emergency response. And then lastly, we had some conversations about our rivers and water quality and water quantity control. So just trying to manage future flood events, but also making sure that we protect and value the water resources we have. And by that I mean riverines and creeks and things. So anybody else on infrastructure that I've missed anything? Kim, Councilwoman Roney, or Kim?
No, this is kind of random, but I realized afterwards we forgot to mention the transit center planning that we had been working on. So if that is something on others' radar, add it, but I had it in my notes to, we forgot that. Can you say it again?
Did not come up.
We had existing plans underway to build this transit center downtown. I just didn't want it to be lost, that's all.
No, I don't think any of our existing plans are lost. They still are. We just have to figure out how to coordinate and time the delivery of certain things.
Sync with recovery.
Yeah, so that's a good point.
You know, under this, probably, I cannot read that from here, but does it have hazard mitigation in there? It does somewhere?
It does. I think it's captured in some of the, yeah, we can make sure it is,
And we
but
actually captured that in the partner role.
I mean, it'll
hazard
affect,
mitigation
it
program.
potentially
So
affects
it's-
city infrastructure, depending on how.
we have the program, but we'll include hazard mitigation planning in general. Yes, that was definitely captured throughout, was just learning from what we just experienced and being prepared. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say the one thing that we're missing that kind of fits is, you said water system. So that's like our existing one. We said
Yes.
water quality, which is like a source issue. We also talked about redundancy for resilience.
Yes, correct.
And then another big topic was, now that we've lost so many trees, we're vulnerable to more fires. So that's on our radar. And I know our survey mentioned roads a lot. We certainly talked about it in our group.
Thank you. Yep. And we got a lot of that. There's a lot of words here, so some of that is captured.
It will be captured in the notes very
Yep.
clearly. We had a small space to do way too much work.
All right. Rachel?
Sorry. Okay, I'm going to start with people. So some of the key themes we saw for year one, a lot of conversation around stability. That's both financial stability, mental health stability, stability in our population and the community. We also talked a lot about safety and displacement, so no one being further displaced after year one. Having a memorial set up, a sense of community and connectivity. We went back to a sense of progress, and then we discussed the need for key milestones to be identified. So when we say we've made progress, we want to agree, what does success look like at the end of our first year? And then once we've identified what success looks like, also celebrating those successes, celebrating as progress is made. And wanting to make sure that throughout the process, during year one and moving forward, that there's community engagement. And so one of the year one goals would be developing a community engagement plan that would go from inception all the way through to implementation for our people-centered strategies. So then moving past year 1 into years 2 and 3, success looks like additional readiness and preparedness. And similar to some of the discussion that Ben was just having, there was a lot of discussion around the development of resilience hubs and neighborhood-based disaster planning. A lot of focus on how do we improve communication, particularly for our vulnerable and at-risk populations. We want to make sure residents feel secure and that they're thriving. So they're safe and stable in year 1 and they're thriving by year 3. Better understanding of the gaps. So a lot of the conversation that we had was during the immediate emergency response. There were a lot of neighborhoods who were really well organized, but then there were neighborhoods who weren't. And so identifying where those gaps are and making sure all of our communities are resilient moving forward. There was also a lot of conversation around healing the community and growing our connectedness, expanding capacity of existing organizations. Also some conversation around growth. What does growth look like in our community? Do we want to grow our population as well as mitigating displacement? And then improving data for community vulnerability. That was one of our 3-year goals, is just having a better data set to make sure, as we say we're making improvements, that we really have data to support the goals that are developed and then also how we're reporting our success. Anything I missed under people?
Rachel, I was going to make
Okay.
an observation as I look at this. There were a couple keys to success which I think were really important. And I thought that there was some relationship between communication and consistency.
Absolutely.
And then also lack of trust in government and managing expectations. Just for a second, what were some of the conversations around that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the conversation that we had was around how successful we were early on, particularly in Aquaman communicating the status of our water recovery, was the consistency. People knew where to tune in, how to tune in to get information, and they knew that they would get clear and concise updates. And so how do we continue to replicate that, where people know where to go to get resources? There was also conversation with council members having readily made resources for them to bring out into communities so that it's one place and you don't have to point to 15 different locations to go to identify what is it that we're doing in this space of housing or infrastructure. So having that consistent messaging and then also making it clear and easy to access.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything? You want to jump over to housing?
Sure. Okay, so moving into housing. Some of the key themes we had for housing, year 1, safe, secure, stable. So also replicating some of the themes we had with people. We got really specific in some instances where we said we wanted to have our TSA voucher holders and long-term housing solutions in Asheville, if they want to be in Asheville, at the end of year 1. We also wanted to have a more accurate data picture just of our housing situation. We wanted to have additional strides made in furthering the development of our CDBG-DR housing plans, expanded capacity to deliver community housing needs, amending zoning to allow for more housing choices, increased funding for home repair, and then increased options for density. We also got specific around wanting to have more low-income housing tax credit funded projects, and we talked a lot about potentially doing additional advocacy through our elected officials to make those opportunities available. A more robust, resilient infrastructure plan for housing, and then a plan for more inclusive temporary and permanent shelter options. So then moving into success for 3 years out, a broader toolkit where we are able to more effectively partner with private developers to incentivize the development of market rate as well as affordable housing units. Having a plan for a purpose-built community, and that conversation did primarily stem around the existing Deaverview property, but could pertain to other properties as well. Preserving our existing affordable housing base as well as our existing housing base more broadly. Furthering the funding for home repair to help people stay in their homes. Improving the data that we have. additional units built, and so we wanted to make sure that we were showing action with the investments made through the Affordable Housing Bond, our Housing Trust Fund, as well as CDBG-DR funds. More resilient housing, and then we got really, really real. So this isn't aspirational, but we said we want data that supports that the housing crisis has not gotten worse. So we don't want things to continue to decline, but we at least want to stabilize and have data that supports that. And then also mentioned a disaster housing plan. We had a really robust discussion around the need for a collaborative disaster housing plan, looking at a lot of different innovative solutions to making sure if there is another crisis situation like we just went through, that we have a better snapshot of what available units and in what format they're available to inform how we deploy people who have been put in a housing crisis because of an acute disaster situation. And then we also talked about more incentives and grant programs. Is there anything I missed, council members, on housing for our 1-year and 3-year strategies?
I just wanted to add the more options for temporary shelter.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So we had the plan in year 1. I didn't mention in year 3, we want to actually have the whatever that plan is come to fruition. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
It's all really clear, right, Seth?
We'll get there. Because next steps, we'll take all this, we'll work, the staff will sort of work through it in their heads. We'll put together what we call a game plan, and it's a game plan is what needs to happen in the short term, what needs to happen in the long term, who is involved, what resources do we need, and what challenges do we have. So that's sort of the next stage of this, take all this back, and then we will bring that back for the council around these categories. A lot of work. All right, does that sound good? All right, before we conclude, and we will conclude early because I can read the crowd. I think this is an exercise that's really important, and I don't want to put it off. I'm going to ask you to pull this out. And we're going to take a few minutes to talk about what we need to work together. And the first question I'm going to ask you to populate is, how can we best engage and fully leverage partners? How can we best engage and fully leverage partners as a council? Hope we're getting there.
Make the process for their engagement with us or collaboration or being grant recipients, as easy as possible with the appropriate accountability. In other words, the complaint we get from community partners that we're trying to provide funding to do the things we want is that it can be challenging to apply and then qualify and then administer, or, we're not getting them funding fast enough, just the whole, every step of the way, we have to be good partners to make them successful and trying to carry out the work we want.
Make yourself easy to work with.
Yeah, thank you.
That's actually, that goes for when you bring partners to give funding and assistance to partners. It also goes up the other direction, getting resources, being an easy to work with partner on the receiving side as well, making sure that that federal agencies and Congress and the state legislature sees you as a really easy partner to work with. And that's on the way you work with them, the way you communicate with them, the language you use with them, and it's the resources that I know, for example, when you got on Air Force One, you had a piece of paper, didn't you?
Marine One.
Marine One, I'm sorry, not Air Force One. That's right, the one with the things around on top of it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but so locally, we have a lot of community partners we work with, and sometimes we hear that that were challenging to work with. And then, you know, and then now we're in a position where we are receiving a lot of federal assistance, and we have to make it so that we're able to receive those funds as quickly as possible and administer it according to whatever their systems are.
When you say ourselves, city council, city overall?
Yeah, I mean, the city council doesn't really have anything to do with any of the mechanics of, yeah, I mean,
Except that we always move the goalpost.
we just
That was
muddy the
really-
water.
Well, that's something for you to think about, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do, like, for example, I was out at Norfolk with a bunch of FEMA folks on Saturday, and they followed up with me and wanted a city contact to talk to about our ask for filtration system. So I can't make all that happen, but I can connect them very quickly to the staff they need. So sometimes we facilitate the communication.
All right. When you think about working well together, here's another question for you. What do we need to communicate well? And that's both council, and that's council and staff.
So council amongst each other
Yeah.
and council with staff.
Yeah.
More time in the day.
Yeah, I mean, more time in the day, we're working on that. Oh, wait a minute, daylight savings time's gone away.
I feel like through this process, the last couple days, we've heard pretty clearly from staff that they are struggling to do what we want because whether they have 4 or 3, or if it's coming from multiple people in its different directions. So I'm hearing for us to work with staff better, we need to be very clear and have our majority ready.
Take that another step. What do you need to get that?
Well, I mean, I'll mention the 3x3s again, but I think there's just, we have, well, I don't know. I guess there's a togetherness that needs to happen. So sometimes we have these agenda briefings and we have council meetings. And as Recovery Rachel so well said yesterday, that's the only kind of communication that they have with us right now. Other than if I call one of you or have lunch or call Deborah or whatever, and there's just something missing. And so we used to have a different process that I think could be folded back in, where a few of us get together and we have staff available to us and we get to ask the million questions then and get some clarity before trying to come together.
Can I offer a friendly addition to that?
Yeah, sure.
We used to have a kind of 3x3 called our council subcommittees. And I also heard earlier, maybe yesterday, that because we haven't been having our council subcommittee meetings, we have been kind of responding in a short window where we would have had more time. And so in addition to that, it would help me to bring back the people with professional and lived experience who really want to share this work and can add capacity. If we were to bring back at least some of our advisory boards, we're missing a lot of helping hands. And with those two things, it would really help me to have data and documents. I know that right now, because we've been in like crisis mode, it's like, how do you press pause long enough? But for a while, we were using the database where we would bring questions, we would put in the database, then everyone had the same sheet of music to work with. And that's not happening anymore either. So I'm kind of curious about that.
Oh, no, I didn't.
I'll just add, I can appreciate that, but I also am kind of worried that everything we just put up here and then asking staff to also bring back all the boards and commissions could be hard. Also layer in that there may be some different boards that we need to invent. You know, like it came up in one, I think Bo had brought up one that was a good idea, an economic development one. So there might be transitions. So some of that would be helpful perhaps, but I'm seeing a lot of workload.
Sage, when we worked, some of you were there for the boards and commissions. They actually said, we would like to collaborate and maybe do something a little different for a period of time. So I think that's something that.
Like a task force almost.
And
It's
maybe.
still a board, but task oriented.
Maybe they do something different in the way they're organized.
And I think what also would be helpful is if we did a little bit of work before we engaged some of the boards and commissions, because from what the feedback that I have heard is that those boards and commissions also want a little bit of clarity in terms of the roles and so forth, because they don't want to spin their wheels and then they deliver something. I think it's similar to what the mayor was saying. We run off and we develop something and we bring it to council and they'd be like, that's not what we asked for, that's not what we want, or I wish we had been more engaged or whatever. So I think it's gonna take us a little bit of time before we're able to bring those boards and commissions back. Plus, you're gonna be working on a process with those groups for them to
That
kind
ties
of
right into that.
identify their roles,
right
and
into that.
and then we'll have
Yeah.
some guardrails in terms of, we need you all to do this.
Emily reminded me that we had the bike rack, which is, if somebody could go back there, Jamie, and grab those. Yeah, not step over. There we go, thanks. You can just take the Post-its, that's all. And just hand those to me would be perfect, thank you. Because they relate specifically to this. So, this came up earlier, 3x3s, so that's one thing. Oops. And then feedback loops. So that was on the bike rack. Anything else?
Last retreat, we developed rules of communication or rules of candor or something. I don't remember what we called
Yeah,
them.
I've seen that when we were there. It gets in the
Maybe some
com-
refreshing of that, or
All right. And this is related, and you started answering it a little bit, but what do we need from each other to be most effective in our roles? Both as council and then council and staff.
I'm trying to remember from the list on our little thing at the dais. I think it says listening, allowing each other to be themselves and bring their personal experience or something. Be respectful. Do you guys remember? Yeah, no surprises. That's a big one on there.
I feel like we're more successful at executing those ground rules, or whatever you want to call them, when the work prior to going into the meeting has happened. It's when we aren't ready and we're trying to make the sausage, and it gets confusing, and people get mad, like me or whoever. And it can get a little rocky. So, I mean, I know when we used to do the 3x3 meetings, Sage, you would say, like, the council meetings were kind of boring, but that's kind of part of it. If you've done all the work, it should be kind of boring, actually. So, I mean, it should just be an opportunity to hear from folks and kind of refine things slightly, but you know, that's just
Preparation.
right.
I mean,
It's just so much more successful.
The amount of
if
work
you-
that goes into preparing for interactions with folks, I mean, look at the work that we've done here. It was all.
And you guys have done a great job.
It
Very
was all
good.
it was all the hard work and many, many hours of thinking and rethinking and preparing and thinking about how we do things, and that's true in many settings.
So I mean, just to echo your point about 3x3 meetings are very helpful to kind of work through some of the more complicated, things that just need more discussing, or, just whatever, before staff's able to kind of pull together something that better reflects what a majority council wants.
I'm going to propose something. Oh, sorry, Sage, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to ask staff what prompts them to make the council follow-up documents? Is that just when we ask enough questions that you put them on a list and answer them, or is there a process there? Because I find them so helpful, and I think it speaks to what Esther is getting at, where we can actually throw out our random questions, get some response ahead of the meeting, ahead of our talks. And I don't know what triggers that for y'all. Is it always, or is it just when questions come in?
It is intended to be every Tuesday, so it would be the packet that's going out in preparation for your Thursday agenda briefing. You'd get a follow-up document at that time. And then the Tuesday of a council meeting, you'll get responses to the questions that you ask at the previous Thursday's agenda briefing. And so I know Councilmember Roney brought up the point that we did have that running Q&A document when we weren't having the briefings. What got a little bit unwieldy for staff is we were getting questions sent via email, via text, and still getting loaded into that spreadsheet. So our recommendation was, let's go back to our pre-Helene process, was if you send us a text, if you send us an email, we put it in that follow-up document and then try to get you a response by the next Tuesday whenever that follow-up document goes out.
Which is reminding me of a tool that would really help me sometimes, and it's the ability to search all those things. Like, I don't have access to Google Drive like you all do, the parent drive, or so I can't go in there and type something we talked about 2 years ago. Or maybe I can and I don't know it.
And that's something that we've talked about. It is not readily available right now, but that's something we can certainly work on, making a searchable index of all of those. So that's
It just
definitely an
saves
enhancement.
time, so I don't have to
Yeah.
call Recovery Rachel and say, what happened?
And we're all, I think we're all frustrated as well. We're in having that ability to search, and, I mean, it's the same for me. I have the same problem. But,
Forget your,
but yeah, it's
spoken up.
frustrating for us all, but we'll get there. Holly will get us
so
there,
that's
I promise you.
actionable? Is that, so that's something that's actionable? I'm going to suggest one thing about working together and just say you're stepping way outside your role, but I am going to do it anyway, and that is in recovery. I think that especially when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to communicating, the more that you all collaborate on making sure that you're having, especially for external audiences, that you have a common message. I think we've talked about that. And then you're strategically thinking about, wait a minute, something's happening in an adjoining community. Wouldn't it be great if one of us was there? And then thinking strategically as a team to represent the city of Asheville as elected officials. That's just something else for you to think about. I mean, I know at the national level, it's, I hate to say it, but at the national level, it's going to be the mayor that has to carry that burden. That's just because that's the way things work in our country. But maybe there's other ways that you can think about where others of you can actively engage in representing the city, being that voice. You know, what is it, Shanika, you say, show up and show up and shout out, or whatever it is. So, but I mean, just being there and being strategic as a council. So, all right. Anything else we need to think about here?
Can we hear from staff? What would y'all think?
Yeah.
What would help y'all?
If every day could be like the retreat days, where we are extremely open and willing to, I have to have a little give and take. But I just want to commend you all for your work. I don't know about the rest of the staff, but I think I've gotten direction out of this session. Yes, we need to refine, we need to, put flesh on the bone, all of that, but I think at least I know what the North Star is. And how we get there, I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to refine and have more specificity and a little bit more detail. But then we've got also input from the CDBG-DR action plan. I mean, there's opportunities for us to layer things over the next several months. So this is not the end. It is a part of our journey, and I think it's been a good body of work. Rachel, anything? Where did Aquaman go?
He'll be back, I'm sure.
He'll be back, okay.
To
get water.
I agree with everything you said, Deborah. I think there's a lot of clarity that we have. Here he is, with water.
Aquaman and his what? What is this water?
Brought his water
Don't tell anybody.
That it's bottled, right?
Yeah. And it's not city water either. Sorry.
Deborah, does that suggest that possibly because we're undergoing so much that we should have a second retreat later in the year? I mean, we do work sessions and they target
Absolutely.
topics, but we don't get into the whole,
what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I think there are going to be lots of
Mini
meetings
retreats?
over the next, and there may be mini retreats, absolutely, yeah.
And I don't know, Deborah, if it's appropriate, but I think when we bring the game plans back, that'll be,
That will be a
that check
long
will have some of the elements of a retreat to it. Boy.
She's like, I'm tired.
Yes, I hear that loud and clear. You didn't have to say a word.
I have
All right.
I have some curiosity because we were all joking about where's Ben, and it was like he's probably getting water, and then he was, but we had a lingering question from Rachel that I didn't hear the answer
Oh,
to.
I'm sorry.
Honestly, the conversation we just had, I think, where we've had lessons learned from previous retreats is when we try to interpret and distill what we hear and actionalize it, we want to make sure that as we're starting to actually breathe life into some of the ideas that have been lifted up today, that we're meeting the mark, and we want to have those conversations with you soon enough. And I think that's what Bo was just talking about. Yeah.
Feedback loop. That was on the bike rack, and now it's right up front. All right, I heard you loud and clear.
Susie, you dropped the cap to your pen under the.
These and other. Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah. You got to get it out there. That's what retreats are about, letting people know what you're really thinking about.
What I'm really thinking is, hey, I'm gonna be uncomfortable.
All right, we're going to conclude, but I'm going to conclude with one thing, and this is where it's so fortunate to have Susie and Emily say to me, get commitments from it. I'm going to ask each of you to think, just for a minute, about one commitment that you're going to walk out of this retreat with as a result of being in this room and having these conversations. Reflect on the work that worked here today, what was successful, and internalize it for a minute and think about walking out of here, what's a commitment that you want to share with us all as a result of this retreat and all the work we've done together. And I'm going to start with staff. You start with staff? I'm going to start with Sage.
All right, y'all will probably appreciate this one. I'm a detail person. I make a commitment to you all to think larger and with less detail. I'll even try to ask less questions.
I'll explain to you what I mean.
Yeah.
No, but really, I mean, I think that's kind of what I'm hearing today, and if you worked with me at all, you can see I just get into the weeds real quick. It's how my brain is. Probably more a planner than a politician. But you know, I hear you loud and clear. We are making it harder the more that we send you in very detailed different directions. So I will try to think larger and zoom out.
Self-awareness is not easy, is it? Yeah. All right, I'm going to go down here. Bo, how do you feel about going next, Bo?
I'll go. I make a commitment to.
He's looking at his colleagues, thinking.
It was specifically a commitment to just
As a result of being in this room.
being in this room.
Doing all this work we've done together. It's something that, oh, wow, I really learned something about what I'm going to do going forward out of this.
I think I'm going to be committed to staying true to my convictions and, planning for 50, 70, 80 years down the road. That's, yeah.
Committing to the horizon.
Yeah, just committed to, just some of the things like mental health, infrastructure, like not, I think we're all committed to those things, but just staying true, following through. I think that's the thing,
Staying true,
following through.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, following through. I like that. Antoinette? Sorry, why did you know?
I don't know. We have this thing going for 2 days now. I'm going to make a point of making sure that I'm one of 4 before I go to staff, or if I have an idea and I go to staff individually requesting their thoughts on what they think others might think about it. And so trying to be one of 4 instead of one of 3 or one of 1 is my goal this year.
That's really interesting. Kim?
Given this unique moment, I think post Helene, I saw us really step into having human problems instead of personal problems, and I'm gonna hold on to uniqueness and innovation and collaboration, accountability, community, and strength, so I can be part of staying in the human problems.
That's awesome. So you embrace the principles.
Maybe so.
Maybe so. Shanika?
Can I clean mine up and say?
Yeah, please.
One of 7?
One of
It's also a
7. Oh,
possibility, too.
okay, that's good. I like that we can think.
We can get there.
Yeah, why not?
We used to.
That's,
Hey, it's aspirational.
3 years.
why not? 3 years.
Okay, I'll make a commitment to collaborate more by at least doing coffee with my peers, or at least having a telephone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe once a quarter. No, just more often, more often.
More often. That's a pretty big deal.
Say yes
Yeah.
to coffee dates.
And then you'll close.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for this. It's been a good 2 days, even though I'm about to lapse into a coma now at the end here. We're in the home stretch.
Yeah.
It's been, and thank you to all the staff and everyone who's participated in it. It's been good. I will say this hurricane has presented a very new normal for me and what I'm trying to juggle personally. It's been very, very challenging from a time commitment standpoint. Because mayors in North Carolina are supposed to be part-time and hold full-time jobs in addition to this work. So I am trying to learn to delegate more and say no, which staff appreciates, so that I don't say yes and then say no and then find somebody else to do it. But and Antoinette's been a fabulous vice mayor so far, being able to delegate to her and other members of council who pick up work. It's just tremendously helpful. And staff filling in for the. Check your email, Internet. Right, and then, yeah.
You're not mic'd back there, Tyler.
I mean, and you can just see, the amount of stuff we have to manage with staff and answering multiple press inquiries all the time and doing interviews and responding to things, and it's just, it's incredibly, it's become a lot more even than it ever was before. So trying to manage that and be a better delegator and not get crushed by it.
That's
Is a goal.
being a better. All right,
But Mayor,
yeah.
thank you for doing all that.
Yeah.
Because you really
Yeah.
did put Asheville in the spotlight of the state through this transition, and we appreciate your efforts.
Yeah. Yeah, the mayor hired me in 2018 to work with mayors all across the state. I took her to Washington recently, and she stood next to the mayor of Los Angeles, and she was the star. She really was. Really fantastic. Maggie, I'm going to let you bring it home, and I'll just start with, and one of the reasons all right.
Yeah, it really helps. I'll go on the same theme of kind of like, we've talked a lot about growth through this storm, and I've heard a lot of reflections from my peers about growth, and so I think a commitment to my teammates on council is I can get pretty rigid, and so that means I don't listen as well as I would like to. So I'm just going to continue to work harder on getting out of what I start by thinking is the way, and realizing that there might be my preferred way, but there's a lot of ways, and to do that is to listen to y'all better.
That is awesome. Those are powerful commitments. We sure did. We sure did. And we're going to put it in the notes if that's okay with you. All right. We are going to finish a little early, and we're going to be working with Deborah and her team to come back to you. I'm really excited about that because I think we're not there yet, and we can bring it home. As your facilitator, it's been a huge, huge honor. As I said earlier, I was born here in Asheville, and this is at the end of my career, so it feels like this is a capstone, and it's the most important thing for me and people all across the state that you are successful here in Asheville. You are the center of the region that was impacted by the worst natural disaster our state has had in recent history. And so it's a real honor for us to be here. And plus, I found it a lot of fun to work with you guys. I know it's hard to believe, Jamie. It really has been fun to work with the staff and the city, and we really look forward to continue that. So I'm really bullish on the process that you have really given yourselves to. It's going to move you forward. We want to improve and keep doing a better job for you on this, and we're real excited. So anything do you want to say in conclusion, Madam?
Thank you all for being as engaged as you have been the past couple of days and as you are most of the time. Thank you, Bo, and your team. Really appreciate
Emily and
all the work
Susie.
and collaboration. And happy Valentine's Day. Let's go home and be with our
right, I
loved
know.
ones. And thank you so much. Appreciate you.
All right. So with that, we will adjourn.
We will